Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yowon.com.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Beyond World is One. I'm Shivan John. Now, this is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. Let's start with the headlines.
Neuter them for a very, very long time, and that's the purpose. You're right.
US Vice President J.D. Vance says the war in Iran is short-term, adds US has accomplished the gross majority of its military objectives in the country and will be out of there soon. Israeli military says that it has launched strikes on the Iranian regime targets in Tehran with more than 10 powerful explosions heard across the capital. Local media reports that joint US-Israeli strikes hit multiple residential areas, killing more than a dozen people. Yemen's Houthis say they have launched a second attack on Israel involving a barrage of cruise missiles and drones targeting multiple military sites. The Israeli military says that it is intercepting the aerial threats fired from Yemen. Hundreds gather in Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities to protest the war in West Asia. Security forces push back demonstrators, knocking several to the ground, with at least one person seen being restrained in a chokehold. Many detained. No Kings. Protests take place across US with attendees rallying against President Donald Trump's policies, the rising cost of living, and the war with Iran. North Korea's Kim Jong-un attends ground test of a solid-fueled rocket engine as well as Special Operations Forces training and a new main battle tank as Pyongyang steps up military development. Greece's most famous landmarks go dark as the lights are switched off to mark Earth Hour. a global campaign to raise awareness of environmental issues. US plans to raise minimum salary requirements for H-1B visas by up to 33%, a move aimed at reducing low-cost foreign hiring. And this would likely impact Indian entry-level professionals while benefiting higher skilled workers. Just a day after the Iran-backed Houthi rebels entered the war, Israel's military said that it was intercepting missiles fired from Yemen. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Sarria said that the group fired a barrage of cruise missiles and drones targeting several vital and military sites in Israel in a second strike.
With Allah's help and reliance upon Allah, the Yemeni armed forces carried out the second military operation in the Holy Jihad battle with a barrage of cruise missiles and drones targeting several vital and military sites belonging to the Zionist enemy in southern occupied Palestine. This operation coincided with the military operations being carried out by our Mujahideen brothers in Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And, by the grace of Allah, it successfully achieved its objectives.
Earlier, Houthis launched a missile attack towards southern Israel. Air raid sirens sounded in the city of Beersheba as Israeli defenses moved to intercept the threat. The IDF later said a ballistic missile fired from Yemen was successfully intercepted and that there were no injuries. Now, the intervention by Iran's Yemeni allies is raising concern about disruptions to Red Sea shipping lanes, already under pressure from the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The entry of the Houthis, who control Yemen's most populous areas, shows the spread of the conflict and poses a direct threat to the Bab al-Mandeb Strait at the southern end. The Bab al-Mandeb Strait lies between the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, bordered by Yemen, Djibouti, and Eritrea. Though only about 30 kilometers wide, this narrow passage is one of the world's most strategically vital maritime choke points. So far, Saudi Arabia has rerouted much of its oil exports from its Red Sea port of Yanbu to avoid the Strait of Hormuz, while it also operates Jeddah port and Jazan port. But with Houthis in the fray, there are fears that shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden can also come under attack. Now, the Houthis have previously fired drones and missiles towards Israel and attacked ships. All these attacks followed after Israel launched its war against Hamas in Gaza, post the October 7th massacre in Israel. The attacks prompted airstrikes by Israel and military operations by the United States against Houthi positions in Yemen. But with the Houthis now signaling a more direct role, attention is again turning to the Red Sea. As the war enters its fifth week, fears are growing of a wider military confrontation. All right, there's more to discuss in this as we get into the nuances of the war and whether the US will be able to find an off-ramp, as the US Vice President has already mentioned that they'll be out of there soon. Is that looking possible? To discuss this further with me, I'm now being joined by Colonel David B. DeRoche, live from Washington. He's a professor at Thayer Marshall Institute and former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Colonel, thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking with you. I would like to discuss this further with you. We've heard what the US Vice President has said. We'll be out of there soon. The US President doesn't want to be back in Iran for a while now. They want to be out of here. 4 to 5 weeks was the initial timeline. Looking at what week 5 looks like now, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait is also seeming to be getting engulfed in hostilities. The Houthis have entered the fray. There's a reported strike on a water source in Iran, and the last time that happened on a water desalination plant, Iran had vowed that they will go after similar attacks and similar targets across the Gulf. And we understand desalination plants are extremely critical to the entire population in the Gulf. Does this seem like a setting for the US to be exiting from this war soon?
No, I don't think so. I think that we probably will have another 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more. What we don't see is the cumulative effect. I mean, Iran is taking hundreds of airstrikes every night, but there's no independent media that operates in Iran. So we don't know what the effect of that is, but it's causing some cumulative damage. And, we're hearing press reports that President Pezeshkian has said that the Iranian economy is on the verge of collapse within 2 weeks. So I think we're in one of these points where there's a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of wavering. But when military regimes fall, recall with Bashar al-Assad, it seems that things are going steady, and then just a sudden collapse. Same thing with the Afghan government when it fell. But I don't think that President Trump wants to be in here in June. I think he wants it over before the summer. So we'll see.
You mentioned summer, Colonel. Is that also keeping in mind that the midterm elections are on the head? And at this point, let's quickly go over the objectives that were laid out in the beginning of the war. There was regime change that was initially, then the missile program, then the drone program, and then the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Strait of Hormuz was initially open. It got locked after the war started. Is there a possible off-ramp? Is Trump looking for a symbolic win to now exit? Is he looking, or is the US looking at the Iranian government to finally collapse financially? Because at this point, they really seem to be continuing with the fight. What is that symbolic win that the US will look for to finally find that off-ramp and get out?
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't think regime change was one of the military objectives of this campaign. It was the nuclear program, the missile program, support of proxies. The Strait of Hormuz became a priority when Iran started attacking neutral civilian shipping there. I think that that's something that's going to have to be dealt with. And but I think that he can, if they can restore civilian shipping and get the volume of missile fire down to 2 or 3 a day, or 5 or 6 a week, rather than right now we're seeing about 15 to 20 missiles launched every day. I think that probably would allow him to say, okay, we've contained this threat, and then let economic pressure do the job of regime change, which is Trump's preferred mode of doing business.
But is there a symbolic structure that they want to achieve at this point? Because Strait of Hormuz seems to be now the crucial point. Mm-hmm. Until that is released, they would want to continue with the fight. Does it seem that way?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that when Iran decided to start attacking neutral civilian shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, that was in part, I think, an effort to divert the bombing campaign away from the, what it was doing, targeting the regime security forces and the nuclear program, the missile program. So I think that is going to have to be dealt with, and I don't think that it would be acceptable for anybody if the United States and Israel stopped this campaign and left Iran in command of what are international waters and even Omani territorial waters, not Iranian waters. That would be an unacceptable result, and I think that fighting would resume very quickly if that were the case.
Also, Colonel, and I want to just come to you with this, and let's just look at the U.S. Foreign policy under Trump. Do you feel, and there is no denying the fact that Iran has taken a good amount of damage. Their military structure has been largely diminished, it's what it seems, and you can make out from the frequency of the missiles being launched per day. Nothing takes away from that. But just look at what the US foreign policy looks like at this point as we enter week 5 of this war. Japan and Australia, when we look more towards the Pacific side and the eastern side, they had initially said they do not want to enter. It rarely happens that there is a call from the US side and an ally or a partner nation would say, no, we do not want to get involved. We've seen and we've heard the kind of statements that Trump has put out to all NATO nations, saying, we'll remember this, that you didn't come to our aid. Then let's look at what's happening in the Gulf. There have been some statements targeted towards MBS, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, and they're not seeming as respectful as that meeting in the White House was just a few months back. And there were also reports that the Gulf may be maybe going over or revisiting their decision to invest in the US, and the China trip, which was initially scheduled for the end of March going into April, that has been postponed to the 14th and 15th of May. Overall, if you look at it, and there is also, let me just quickly add, there are reports of negotiations going through Pakistan. Overall, do you find US foreign policy taking a big hit, regardless of how much military advances they've made in the war?
Well, I think the damage to U.S. foreign policy isn't necessarily from this war. It's from Donald Trump. I mean, you know, when he took office, he picked a fight with Canada, of all people. That's like kicking a puppy. And then the whole Greenland fiasco with Denmark, which I still can't quite get my head around. So, you know, I don't think many people like him, but I will take exception with one thing. You know, I was in the Gulf for 3 weeks. I spent the first half of the war in the Gulf because I couldn't leave. And I talked with a lot of people there, and initially they were irritated with the United States, saying, you know, you started this war, you got us in. But as the Iranian attacks on civilian infrastructure stepped up, they said, oh my gosh, you know, we are, whether we like it or not, Iran is a threat. Basically, Iran's actions, at least in the eye of our Gulf partners, have validated Trump's war aims. They said that, you know, Iran is a threat. They are threatening us, and our only option really is to get actually closer to the U.S. and to ensure that this country doesn't threaten us again. So, yeah, U.S. diplomacy has taken a hit since Donald Trump became president, but the actions, we're blessed by the, we don't have a monopoly on stupid. And I think the Iranian strikes on the Gulf states in particular was stupid, and it will rebound against them. But we have a lot of stupid.
All right, Colonel, you always take an objective view of things, but just hold on for me. There's more I'd like to speak to you about. We're just breaking into breaking news coming in. I'll come right back to you.
I am your...
Breaking news coming in, viewers. Kuwait's military has said that it is responding to hostile missile and drone threats. This is in a post on social media. The General Staff of the Kuwaiti Armed Forces confirmed that any explosions that may be heard are the results of air defense systems intercepting hostile targets. And this as the strikes on Gulf states continue, with the war in West Asia now having completed a month. That's the big development we're tracking for you at this hour. Kuwaiti armed forces are defending against incoming hostile projectiles, drones and missiles. This is what they've put out on their social media platform as well, mentioning that it is responding to hostile missiles and threats from drones. General Staff of the Kuwaiti Armed Forces confirmed that any explosions that may be heard are the result of air defense systems intercepting hostile targets. I'll go back to Colonel David B. DeRoche, who's here with us on World DNA. Colonel, we were just discussing this, that the strikes in the Gulf have only increased. You have your views on what that looks like in terms of Iran. It's not a good idea, is what you're suggesting, for Iran to continue with that. But the fact is that it is still continuing. And let me just quickly add, this is only for the sake of our viewers, that Iran said that if we are targeted, we'll go after all these bases that the US has in the region. Of course, those targets, those strikes have not been limited to the strikes on US bases. There have been strikes across many other regions in the Gulf, some that Iran has not accepted responsibility for. So at this point, do you find this as any kind of an indication that in a couple of weeks this will end?
Well, it's kind of a non sequitur. I think that you know, it will probably end within a few weeks. I thought it would be over by now, to be honest. So discount my views accordingly. But you know, it's important to note that the Gulf states, who are taking more missiles than Israel has, they denied the U.S. access, basing, and overflight for these operations. They basically said, we don't want to be a part of this. And any U.S. assets that wanted to take part in it had to leave. So what remained were bilateral training missions and defense assets that were working with the Gulf states. And they got attacked anyhow. So I think that's a strategic mistake by Iran, and I think that, you know, it's quite possible that we'll see in the next few weeks, the Gulf states actually conducting active military operations against Iran, in particular the United Arab Emirates, which cannot allow this to become a precedent. It seems as though this is about more than striking out against the U.S. I think there's also an effort to discredit an alternative and much more attractive and successful model of Islamic development in places like Dubai than you have in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that seems to be something that's existential and that honestly won't be resolved until the regime in Iran is defeated.
Understood.
This indiscriminate attack does not give me hope that we'll see a short end to the war.
Understood. And Colonel, and this is essentially what I wanted to ask you. At what point do the Gulf states decide that, okay, we'll need to get involved? Because they haven't done so, at least they've not accepted any attack from their side towards Iran. They've maintained that we have not carried out any military attacks on Iran at this point, whether it's in retaliation or otherwise. But let me quickly also understand, you mentioned that you weren't expecting this war to continue till now. Given your military background, do you feel that's a sentiment across the U.S. administration as well, that they didn't expect this to last so long?
Yeah, I think so. I think that what really surprised them was Iran's willingness to attack neutral states and neutral civilian shipping. So instead of the political imperative when Iran did that was assets that were being dedicated in a very disciplined fashion at the regime leadership, the Revolutionary Guard leadership, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program. Some of those assets had to be diverted in order to help protect the sea lanes and to destroy Revolutionary Guard naval assets, which are, small boats. They're easy to hide. So I think that diversion was probably a real factor there. But again, that's a tactical problem for the United States, but it is a strategic problem for Iran. They've basically told their neighbors, you cannot live in peace with us. The regime has to change for these guys to live in peace. So it's a problem, and I think a lot of people are surprised by it, and I certainly was.
There's the other objective, the other perspective to it is the Iranian perspective, Colonel, where they say that you can't live in peace until you have U.S. bases located. So they're putting it on the U.S. that the U.S. is the reason why these attacks are carrying out. Of course, they've not been limited to the U.S. bases. But let me just also come to this point, and this is something I'm happy that we are having this conversation because I'd like to get your opinion on it. The U.S. military assets, they've always carried this impression. They are strong. It's the strongest military in the world, goes without saying. But just look at the damage that it has taken, whether it's the F-15s, the famed F-35 also taking a hit, the high-cost radars, and then the THAAD systems, which, as per reports, are also deployed around Dimona and Arad, and they could not stop an incoming missile from Iran. Do you find the facade of, or the image of, unassailable U.S. assets getting dented the longer this war prolongs?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that professional soldiers wouldn't be surprised given the amount of hours flown and the distance flown. And it's worth noting that, there's been no reports of fighter aircraft launched from GCC states, which are very close to Iran. They're still flying from way over in the Levant. I think it would be surprising that you would not lose a joint strike fighter to, just to maintenance or some sort of ground fire. And it appears that we've lost one. That actually, I think for a professional soldier or airman would not be surprised by that. The 3 F-15s lost to Kuwaiti friendly fire, that is an extremely embarrassing incident in coalition warfare. But the embarrassment,
I get it.
It's not entirely American embarrassment, but I mean, it's certainly not as cost-free as we would hope. But we've had this before. I mean, we lost an F-117 stealth fighter in operations in Kosovo. That was a real shock because that was considered to be invulnerable. When you put an airplane up, a certain percentage of them are not going to come back, and when you operate under remote conditions, these are just problems.
Colonel, thank you for taking that question, because it took me some time to find somebody who would be willing to engage in this conversation and take that question from me. There would be more to discuss, as the war only seems to be continuing. That was Colonel David B. DeRoche joining me here on World DNA. Always a pleasure speaking with you, sir.
It's a real honor. Thank you. Ask anytime.
All right, viewers, that's a wrap on World DNA for today. Of course, news and updates continue. This is WION World is One. I'm Shivan Chan. Now, slipping into a very short break. Please come back.
Five states, one powerful voice. From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal. Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION. WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness. On Wings this week, how travel trends shift due to the Iran war and where you can go instead of West Asia. We also cover festivals across India and Eid celebrations worldwide, only on WION, World is One. A global leaders' confluence. 7 dynamic sessions. Capture the pulse of decision makers, innovators, and policymakers. Celebrating the game-changing icons. All on one mega platform. Watch the highlights of WION World Pulse, the rhythm of the new world order.
हिंदू बहुत ही डरपोक कौम है।
As Dhurandhar The Revenge breaks box office records, we take a look at all the Indian films that have crossed the 1,000 crore rupees mark worldwide. Know all about the most iconic free concerts in music history. And steal some style cues from celebrities to rock skirts this spring season. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on Beyond at these times.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION. World is One.